Welcome to Table Talk, the CEDH podcast where our discussions go beyond the stack. Join us as we navigate the intricacies of CEDH. Whether you're a seasoned planeswalker or a new recruit, Table Talk is your hub for CEDH. Welcome, boys. Thank you for coming and joining us today. We got my boy Deke and Ruckus. How you guys doing?
Pretty good, pretty good. Thanks for having me again, brother.
No problem, homie. And
Yeah,
Deke,
no
you're the first
complaints.
time.
Yeah, it is first time for everything, right?
Hell yeah. All right, so today, as you can tell by the overlay up here, the topic of today is board state assessments, overall role assessments, people you should be prioritizing and people you shouldn't be, stuff like that. Do one of you two want to kick us off?
Let's hear the new guest Deke's got. I thought you have any guidelines on where you want to start or anything like that? Any ideas?
All right, well, let's start. I mean, like at the very beginning, all right? So, like when you guys sit down to a pod, how do you determine, like, just sitting at the pod before even pre-games have started, just based off of commanders and shuffling and the small conversations you're having with people at the table, how do you determine who you think you're going to be dealing with immediately?
Yeah, for sure. So it depends on the deck I'm playing. I think the two ones that I'll use today for probably the three decks for examples are like Dahada for turbo, Riel for control, and like Gimnacrom for mid range.
Yeah.
So really, like depends, based on the deck. If there's not much stacks these days, but if I'm playing control, I'm looking for a friend. CDH is a powerful format. It gets more powerful every set. There's just banger after banger, and so as a control deck, you either need stag pieces or you need a friend. And so if there's a Talion at the table or whatnot, that's I'll usually say like, hey, we're friends, right? We're gonna make this game go long.
Yeah.
It's necessary.
May the better control deck win, right?
Yeah. If there's a visit at the table or whatnot, like that's the conversation I want to be having.
Fair enough. Ruck, what kind of convos are you having?
So I've played control a couple times. What I'm usually doing in games lately is I've been playing a little bit faster decks, more combo decks and stuff like that. I definitely check the board to see what I'm playing against, and I again, you got to mull. You mull accordingly to each player at the table. If I'm playing my turbo deck like Deke says, I'm going to not. Oh man, we're gonna have to cut this part, bro. I'm sorry.
You're good.
So, yeah, when going after Deke is so hard. I mean, really, with me, I don't get a lot of politics at the tables most of the time. I'm usually one of the bigger targets at the tables, so I really in the beginning of the games I try to think how my deck's gonna do against these decks, and then mull for that kind of stuff. Whether it be a quick dockside if there's people coming with a lot of artifacts and enchantments, stuff like that, or if I'm gonna have to take it a little slower by doing something different. But yeah. Sorry about that, Josh.
No, you're good, homeboy. Don't worry. So
I think if you don't mind, Josh, I think one of the interesting things, and Rutgers mentioned turbo, it's always one of those things where like there's slightly different flavors and speeds of turbo, and so if I'm playing a turbo deck, I want to kind of get a sense of the table, the decks at the table, and figure out who's the faster deck. If I'm the faster turbo deck, if I'm first in turn order, I'm keeping slightly different hands. Maybe like prioritizing less like silence effects and more just like kind of go fast jam hands.
Yeah, it's a lot easier playing it than it is talking about it. It's easier in like a composition, a pod composition where we could talk about each other's decks. Like, so it'd be a little easier to go off of for me. I'm sorry about that.
No. You're 100% right. The one thing that kind of ties into, I guess, the turbo talk quickly while we're here is like the one thing I always ask when I'm sitting down at a pod: if there's a black deck, are you on Nas? And I think it's a question that most people are asking. It's a safe bet to assume that most black decks, if you see them, they are on Nas. So that throwing that question out there to know, okay, well, is this guy reliant on his life? Am I gonna have to bash his face? Is a pretty reasonable and important question to be asking, even going before like before the game starts. If they tell you, they tell you. If they don't, they don't. Sometimes you just have to know based off of the commanders if they would typically run it or not. They don't have to give you that information, but typically most people will. I don't ever lie or say I'm on it or I'm not on it if I am or if I'm not. If I'm on it, I'll just say yeah, I'm on it. If I'm not, I'm not. But now let's actually get into the unknown, the actual meat and potatoes of this whole thing. Like, you're in turn 1, turn 2. Say you guys are in seat 3 or 4. How do you guys start to determine who the problem is, or figure out if you're the problem and you have to worry about protecting yourself opposed to worrying about other people? Where's
the fish?
Where's the yeah? That's
Where's
fair.
the fish?
The draw engine. That's totally fair.
Being at the end of the table is always kind of scary. I mean, depending on the deck, of course, but like Corval kind of likes it in the end. But most of the time, it's real scary being back behind a lot of players, especially because of those turn 1 Ristic studies, the turn 1 fishes, the turn 1 Talions. Sometimes, like getting out in front is obviously a really powerful thing to do in Magic. It's the luck of the draw, or the roll. But board assessment in the end spot is pretty much who's got the most mana, who's threatening to do the biggest thing next turn, and what can I do to stop it or perhaps make it a little harder, is what I'm thinking about.
That's fair.
Don't give any unnecessary food to the fish or to the heuristic study. If I'm not gonna use a crypt on turn 1, and I know there's a big dockside deck at the table, and I mean, I'm not worried about a wheel. Sometimes I'll hold that. Just depends on what we're playing against at the time.
To dig a little deeper into that topic there that you were talking about, when is it appropriate and not appropriate to be paying for your fishes, your Ristics, your espers? Because like this is a thing. Now, some people say you have to pay for it every time. Some people are like, you never pay for it. They're gonna get it anyway. Some people are kind of down the middle. Where do you two sit, and what do you guys think is the most appropriate way to be paying and not paying? We'll start with you, Deke.
Let's let Deke go first on this one.
Yeah.
I'll say one word. It's sacrilege.
to just feed indiscriminately.
Yes.
So this is like the hardest question to answer in a vacuum, and so I think first of all, it depends. It depends on the deck. It depends on the pot, and it depends where you're at. So, if you're ahead, right? You're ahead on board. You're ahead in this game. You're doing your best to convince the table to be as responsible as possible, right? Your hand lines up. You're playing Kinnan, right? Mm-hmm. And you've got, turn 1 Dork, and you can sandbag some of this stuff, and there's a fish out, and it slows your other opponent's development. Well, like I'm convincing the table to be as responsible as possible.
Oh yeah.
I'm in 4th. It like in not necessarily in seed order, but like position in the game. It depends. If it's the person that's way out in front, my chances of winning this game are probably low. I'm likely to feed to try to establish a little bit. It's like someone in 2nd or 3rd or in last. It depends. If I'm a turbo deck, I don't really want anyone to feed. But if I'm a control deck or a slower mid-range deck, I think that sometimes I want to be feeding the fish. You want to be feeding the fish, right? There's a low color blue deck that's got a Ristic or a Fish out. There's a turbo deck in the pod that you can't stop. Giving them a couple cards is probably a good idea. Communicate with them a little bit. See if you can work together to solve the problem using the Ristic or the Fish. And pack those Red Blasts, pack those Pyroblasts. Like, we're in this kind of mid-range slugfest where Ristic Study is, Ristic Study, the Ring, these just kind of continuous value engines. So Timna, somewhat Crom, Tavesh, like these are the cards that are winning games now, and so like the removal on the Ristic Study and whatnot like has always been kind of a hot topic. The decks I play, if I have a Red Blast or a Pyro in my hand, I'm kind of flagging that for Ristic Study. Like I'm holding that. If something is not killing me, I'm not snapping it off. Or a Consecrated Sphinx, or something of that nature. Those are the cards that are killing me. They're ending my game.
Yeah, for sure. So again, on the draw thing again, there's maybe one or two instances where I'm actually okay with giving a card to somebody. I just think, like we spoke about on the last podcast, there's not too much more in CEDH that's stronger than card advantage.
Yeah.
Ramp is good, but I mean card advantage is nuts. So like what Deke said though, there is instances where you just have to do it. If there's somebody with a control deck and you need to feed them a counter to stop a game-winning play, there is definitely a reason to feed a fish. Again, and another, you see, again, it's hard going after Deke, but like what he said as far as if you're really far behind, I was thinking of it in a little different way. So if you're really far behind all of the other players and you see somebody's got a pretty good advantage going over here and down at the spot behind you, sometimes I will feed a fish and just be like, look, you guys got all the value and stuff. You guys deal with it. Feeding a fish in that sense, maybe I scare the rest of the guys into not feeding it because they don't want him to impact their game as much as I think they are. And since I'm in such a bad position, it kind of maybe takes a couple eyes off of me at the same time. But yeah, politicking is really hard to get draws out of me. I mean, if I have to feed a fish, I gotta feed it. But it's almost a never thing. I don't like it.
So yeah,
He brought up one thing that I just want to touch on, and you brought up like card advantage and mana advantage, and one of the things with Ristic and Fish that sometimes newer players to the format, like, it's not super intuitive, but so there's some decks that card advantage equals mana advantage to a much bigger degree. So I think Rogsai or like the traditional blue farm are probably the best examples of just like, if you draw this deck 7 cards, they will draw 2 cards that are gas, you know,
Ritual
3 pieces of ramp to get that gas out, and 2 pieces of interaction to protect it. And like that's a really bad time. If you have to have a big turn, a big setup turn to win for the next turn, something like a Thras Timna, right? If you're feeding a dork deck, heuristics, do draw as many cards as you want, right? But if you're feeding Dahada a bunch of cards, or I mean that's not a Ristic deck, but
Kinnan.
Rogsai, just any of these decks, mostly red decks, right? The ones that are red, black. Feed a Bant deck a bunch. You're not going to have a bunch of rituals into an Adnaz that you can't deal with or whatnot.
Tavesh Crom is another one you don't want to be feeding cards to because like they're just gaining. Well, yeah, I think you're right there, Deke. With red specifically being in that color, like red blue is, in my opinion, one of the strongest color pairings in the format. It's just the explosiveness of red and then the control aspects of blue, plus the drawing abilities that blue provide. just make it such a powerhouse. So yeah, Grixis is something to be like definitely on the lookout for. You don't want to be giving them cards because they have the black with the tutors, they got the counter magic with the blue, and then the treasure generation and shit like that with the red. Like it's just ridiculous. You can't be giving them cards.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Generally the Grixis, and then 5-color piles. Like the card quality is so high that 5 of their cards equals 7 or 8 of another deck at the table.
Yeah,
exactly.
So,
for sure.
When it comes to specifically draw engines, though, I'm typically pretty good at paying for it, with the exception of fish. Fish is just like, unfortunately, you just do your best to try and not feed it for as long as it's out there, right? Like,
Wait it out.
yeah, that's your best bet. Now, every once in a while, I'll play a single card or two to try like feed into the fish, hoping like, okay, maybe give him a couple draws, he'll get rid of it on his turn, right? Like sometimes that is a thing, because people, I have seen it hundreds of times, and I'm confident you guys have too. Out of spite, keep a fish around even though they're not doing anything else. They'll just keep it around because they haven't drawn from it yet, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
like, if you give them a card or two, make them feel a little happier, like that fish has done something, they're more likely to get rid of it. So, sometimes feeding them 1 to 2 cards, if they are impactful cards for your board state, is not a bad idea. I do agree with you, though, 9 times out of 10, Ruck, though. Giving someone cards is sacrilege. You don't want to be doing it because you're just getting them closer to their wins at the end of the day, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. With that being said, though, like I know it's very difficult talking about these kind of situations in vacuums. I think there are certain circumstances where giving the Ristic or the Fish or the Esper or fuck Croms, giving them their draws isn't a bad situation. For example, if somebody is presenting Win and you can't do anything to interact with it, but you're able to play some spells to give them draws, right? In a way to try to stop them from getting their combo off or whatever, you throw down a couple spells that might help you out, but give them the draws to try and get a little deeper or whatever. Those times it's acceptable, I guess. But yet again, I'm still drawing that fine line of like, it's not something I'm the biggest fan of, because you don't want to be giving anybody advantage period. And like, yeah, like you said, Deke, especially me playing a 5-color pile with Najila, you're not wrong when you say, like, if people are just like, yeah, I don't give a fuck, I'm going to try to win here, and I'm getting like 6 or 7 cards, those 6 or 7 are just gas. Like, there's just no other way around it, right? Because, like, it's 5, unless it's like 4 or 5 lands, there's like rituals, there's fucking tutors, there's like, it's just insane. So
Rituals, tutors, combo pieces.
yeah, that's all it is. But kind of going off of that, though, what are some of the politic moves that you guys use when it comes to you being the problem at the board versus the politics that you use when you are in the worst position at board? Like, what are the two, like, what, based off of your guys' play styles, what are the 2 pivot points you have? Like, when you are in the threatening, like the most threatening position, what politics do you use? And then when you're at the worst position at the table, what politics do you use to try and gain advantage?
Okay, so I guess I'll take this one first. I don't think it's almost impossible to politic for your own benefit in the lead of a game. So, I mean, you'd have to be pretty sneaky, or I mean, I think the only way I could politic if I was leading a game, especially in the group of people that we play with, it would be for someone else to present a win before I could, and just some kind of help to somebody else to stop it. But it almost would never even equal. I mean, me and Deke ran into it the other day, actually. Yeah, Deke went to cast an intuition on top of, I don't remember what it was, but yeah, something like that. Setting up for his win while simultaneously stopping somebody else from their win.
I remember listening in on that game.
Yeah. That it was great politicking by Deke too, because he was this close to let him slide with it. But I just couldn't think of a world where if I did not win, or if this player did not win, I think I might have been next in turn order, and then Deke would have got a turn after me. So if I didn't win here, and we stopped this guy, he's gonna have nothing to help me with Deke, and Deke's under a Grand Abolisher. So I had to bite the bullet and try to do that. But like I said, Deke is professional at politicking. I mean, what was Riel was a deck and a half, and he explained it to me a couple times that kind of deck really needs you to be a really good politic playing guy. But
it can't survive on its own.
Yeah, for sure, and I could see why after a couple times playing it. But every time I played it, I was like, Jesus, what are you talking about, dude? You smash everything all the time. But a lot of it had to do with us playing into the hand. Politicking is really hard if you're trying to get anything out of it and you have any kind of strength showing on the board. If you're not really good with your words, you're usually not going to get anywhere with it. But yeah.
Education, I think, is like is my thing. Like, I don't know, the way I play the game, whether right or wrong, just generally just trying to figure out what's going to happen next, like what's going to happen in the next turn cycle, what's going to happen 2 turn cycles from now, and like oftentimes letting your opponents know like what's possible out of a given deck or out of a given scenario. I think Sisei is a good example. Like 5-color Sisei. You can tell like when you're playing in a pod with other players and there's a Sisei deck. Like there's a lot of players that are like, an activation is fine, and it's like an activation isn't fine.
No, it isn't.
It's really not, because like this is our last chance to kind of interact here before a Teferi or I don't know if they're messing around with Kutzel if the Teferi's gone or whatnot, but just educating the other players at the table, like what is likely to come out of something if someone's kind of balking on a tutor or whatnot, and they're like, and you can tell they're maybe deciding to counter the tutor or what the person gets with the tutor. If you've got the read that I don't know, like if they've got a cavern in play or whatnot, just letting them know that, like, dude, if you don't counter the demonic tutor, it's a Grand Abolisher that's then uncounterable, or we're seeing kind of like there's more scenarios in A's game where you're not kind of safe behind a wall of interaction, or sometimes a pocket full of counter spells doesn't necessarily do it, right? There's decks that win games through activated abilities and whatnot, and that's where Kinnan pilots, Sisei pilots, these decks that kind of like don't need cast spells and kind of just sit there. I tie them to a certain extent. Politics really, really matters for those decks, because like the threat of the unknown is something that like the table as a whole is either going to kind of overestimate or under. And so like doing your best to be kind of honest about like what could happen, like, dude, this is going to happen next, right? Or like there's there's a Hullbreaker horror in that list, and so like going into however many mana, like maybe uncounterable, like this demonic tutor probably needs to get hit.
So you're totally
just
right.
Stuff like that.
I've been saying it for months. Kinnan gets left unattested for way too long. They get all their dorks, they get all their rocks out, and then all they need to do is throw down a Kinnan. Now they have so much fucking mana to do whatever the hell they want, and nobody's hitting them because, it's just a couple mana. That couple mana adds up real fucking quick in a Kinnan deck, dude. One of the best things you can do is get them low in life.
Yeah, and that's the crazy thing too, because people are always like, "Well, there's an Adnos player at the table," but the thing, you can't do. You pretty much, if you're not running an Oof or a Null Rod effect or Curse Totem effect in your deck, Kinnan's gonna run all over you, no matter what it is you've got down there. You can't just have the game plan say, "Hey, I'm just gonna kill Kinnan every time I see him," because you're gonna run out of removal spells before he runs out of mana every time.
Deck is all
Exactly.
mana. Deck is all mana, right?
It's all mana and then big shit that pounds you. You know, it's that makes it impossible to play anymore. I mean, Kinnan is my definition of the boogeyman in the CDH format right now. I mean, there's a lot of great decks, but Kinnan is the boogeyman.
I have to agree, especially in our server. Like, Kinnan is a fucking house, and it does so well. And like,
with a good pilot, it is a force to be reckoned with.
Now, I want to say it's just because the deck is great, but 100% of it is because of politics, right? And like me hopping into a pod up until recently, the Kinnan players were able to pivot and be like, well, why are you swinging at me when there's a fucking open Adnaz player over there because his Najila and Warriors are tapped out and shit like that. But till recently, that was a very valid argument because I was on Naz. I'm not anymore. I'm playtesting without it. But the fact that they were able to just use that line as a gimme all the time to prevent their face from getting bashed in and continue to gain value was such a frustrating thing for me, which is why I had to make that move. I'm like, you know what? Fuck this. I'm sick and tired of that being a pivot point that everyone is using. I need to just remove that from my deck and try something else. So that's what I'm doing. And especially with the format going in a little bit more mid-rangey, I think Adnaz might not necessarily be as necessary in something like Najila as it used to be. I could be wrong. That's why the playtesting is a thing. But like, yeah, man, Kinnan's much like Grixis. You can't let them do their thing for too long. You got to slow them down or stop them in some way, shape, or form. I always find the best way to do that is get their life as close to zero as possible.
Or Curse Totem.
Yeah, fuck, one of the two, honestly.
Yeah. I've been looking for. I don't know. I've been trying to figure out what I've really wanted a Curse Totem in like Nozeless Timnacrom for a while, and like this close. But you know, the issue is card quality. Is like you know, there's so many good cards to play in those four colors. Yeah, it's tough. But is the talk about Kinnan and whatnot. If you're playing for a long game, right? If you're playing a mid range deck, you're playing a control deck, like there gets to be these kind of unassailable board states, and kind of like the point of no return is something that I like to try to like, you know, try to convince the table that like, you know,
we need to prevent
hey, this is, you know, they're doing very small, like seemingly innocuous things, but like the combination of this and this, like your this is shut off, this is shut off, this is shut off, this is shut off. And so if we don't pressure like this certain aspect of their play, like if we can't choke them on mana or on cards or whatever the given situation is, there's scenarios in which like there is no answer to, because there's just like so many layers.
Oh yeah.
Or you know, one answer in your deck and it's, you know, in its Cyclonic Rift or whatnot.
So that's the snowball effect. It's like what's the name? Boros Commander.
That's the world we're in, right?
Yeah.
We're just in this mid-range kind of snowball-y thing, like similar to what happened with 60 card formats in like Legacy was never really like a snowball-y format, and kind of the printing of like War of the Spark, I think, changed that with like Dreadhorde Arcanist, these low drop things that are just kind of these snowbally value engines, and Oko was kind of the epitome of that. All of these cards have gotten banned, right? And like that's what, like, you know, we're seeing a little bit less Mardu, a little bit less Rogsai. I mean, they're still there, right? But there's a lot of mid-range decks, and you know, a lot of games are decided by whose snowbally engine sticks first.
100%. If you can get the draw engine on board first, typically you're winning that game. Like, that's how I really feel.
those turn one rings, the turn one heuristic studies that are left untouched for a cycle or
Fuck,
two.
even a turn one stacks piece, depending on the stacks piece, right?
I still
Mm.
turn one Archon of Lemuria is
So,
in the one spot. It's got about to be the worst thing you can get.
how do you guys like to interact with stacks pieces, politic with stacks pieces? What do you guys like to do with them? Because in our format, yes, stacks isn't seen too often anymore. But with that being said, it is always that big fucking shadow looming over our shoulders, always there, right? It'll never
Always
just completely go away. There's always,
little.
yeah, exactly. There's always at least a sprinkle of stacks in some decks, whether it's a fucking blind obedience all the way down to a fucking Dranith Magistrate, right? Like, there's something. How do you guys politic with the stacks pieces, like politic keeping them or getting rid of them, and shit like that? Like, what do you guys? How do you guys interact with them and politic for them and against them, basically? Sorry.
You want to take this one, Deke?
Sure. I generally like stacks pieces. I like other people's stacks pieces in the decks that I played in Dahada, not so much, but I'm very much in like the low colored blue kind of like Real or Talion or that kind of deck space. And so I generally like opponent stacks pieces. Um, the ones that I like myself in this current meta, in Tim Necrom playing both Blind Obedience and Dauntless Dismantler,
House.
those cards do incredible work in this mid-range meta. We were just talking about like getting your value engine online first, getting the mana advantage, getting the card advantage, and like and a turn one Blind Obedience or Dauntless Dismantler does absolute work. There's not many Dork decks, there's not many Oof decks. There's a ton of Rock and Dockside decks, and those two cards make your own Docksides better. They like if you can follow it up with some sort of advantage engine, like you're so far ahead before anyone else can develop. And it's not often that anything outside of like a turbo deck that's trying to like just dockside into a win is going to spend a card to remove the dismantler or the blind obedience. And so I like that kind of species, the ones the kind of speed bumps that just like for 2 mana in a card and no further investment other than sitting on your ass. Get turn after turn advantage, and it seems minimal.
Yeah.
Like in the moment, more games you play with those in play, it's brutal.
Yeah, 100%. The more turns that those are around, like you're like, yeah, it doesn't seem like much. Oh, so what? This mana crypt comes in tap this turn. Well, yeah, this turn that comes in tap. Next turn, when you're fucking throwing your dockside down, so do the 6 treasures you're getting, right?
Yeah, and that mana crypt coming in and tapped just
slowed you down for a turn.
Just killed your turn this turn. Right?
Yeah.
It's a mana crypt pass kind of thing. I'm on the same exact boat as Deke. I love stacks. I come from playing stacks a lot actually, but this is a very hot topic. Stacks removal in at least our Discord, and I believe it should be a hot topic anywhere that you're trying to play CEDH. The thing about stacks is they, especially the world effects, the ones that affect everybody. It is never okay to come out from under a stacks piece and not do anything.
No.
I get it that it hinders your board and it stops you from being able to play the game, but doing something like that in more cases than not, it's been a game where you've drawn a bunch of cards, turn past, not done anything, and everybody else at the table's done the same thing. If no one's removed that stacks piece, it's because everybody is under it. And then when people do remove it and then pass their turn, they just go on to lose the game in the next few turns. So that is a really hot topic for me. I don't remove stacks pieces almost at all
unless you plan on winning that turn.
unless I plan on winning or constructing a board state that makes it hard for you guys to catch up to my value engine or to what I'm doing or what I'm threatening now. It makes you pivot off of what you even want to do to stop me.
Mhm.
That's the only time I will ever remove a stax piece. It doesn't make sense to me, and it's like it's one of those sacrilege things. It makes me very upset when there's stacks pieces on the board, even if they're not mine. But if they're holding the table down and you really are not going to do anything after you remove it, there's no reason why you should be doing that in a competitive format. But yeah, removal of stacks pieces, keeping stacks pieces on the board is a very, very touchy subject. I think playing stacks, period, is one of the hardest archetypes to play.
100%.
You must know everything at the table. You must know 2 turns ahead at least. You have to know how every deck is working, what one spell played on the board equals in the next couple turn cycles or the next couple spells. So and you don't just throw stacks pieces on the board because
So
you have
that's
them
what
in
I
your
was
hand.
about to say. Is like to kind of piggyback off of your shit right there. Is like you kind of in that same vein of like you need to know when to remove stacks pieces. You also need to know when to play the stacks pieces. Because there are too many games that I've seen and have been a part of where somebody will slam down a stacks piece and lock out the other 2 players while I'm in an advantage, or lock me out and let someone else just steamroll the game away. Like, and not even the guy that threw down the stacks piece, right? Like, it's like player 2 in a 4-player pod and player 4 put down the stacks piece. Like, he has no effect on the game other than locking the other 2 players out of even trying to interact with him. Like, knowing when and to remove stacks is kind of piggybacking off of what you said, what makes stacks be one of the hardest archetypes to play in the format. Because, like you were saying, knowing every combo, knowing every deck and how they play and what cards they need to do their things is what determines what stacks pieces you're playing, right?
Yes, it's successfully piloting because anybody could
Yes.
play a stacks deck. They seem simple, really straightforward. There's barely any text on the cards. I mean, you can just cast it because you have the mana.
Mm-hmm.
But and a lot of things I see is people who play stacks decks. They do have these world effects, and they can cast them really early in the game, and they turn themselves off completely. They cast those turn 1 root maze with forest root maze pass. Like you're not accruing any advantage anymore. Now you've got 1 land ahead of somebody and you've used it already to cast a spell. No dork, no rock, no nothing else before the root maze.
Mm-hmm.
It's just it gets kind of annoying because and this is one of my personal pet peeves. We play competitive CEDH. These games, unless there's a really good stacks game or a really good mid-range control game, these games aren't supposed to last an hour and 30 minutes for 2 hours and stuff like that. But people muck up games by dropping stacks pieces like that and no one being able to remove them. Turn 1
Or
stasis.
wanting to remove them because they're afraid to give someone else the advantage, right?
Yeah,
Like, that's the other part. Is you
exactly.
got people dirtling and sandbagging because they're like, I don't want you to win.
Yeah, and then you see that one's me.
Mm-hmm.
I will dirtle and I will sandbag
Yeah.
until I have a window that I feel I can get through. And even sometimes then, like if I feel like you got too much stuff in your hand to where me removing this stacks piece and going into a winning turn and letting you counter the hell out of me and just win on your turn, that's still not a time to remove a stacks piece. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a very, very fine line in that gameplay. So I don't recommend it to the new players.
No.
Yeah, there's also something that's happened in well, a card that was printed, and then also a little bit of like deck building theory or strategy or whatnot. You know, I think the one that used to be the big one to pay attention to is like, all right, that rule of law, someone bounces it and before the targeted cyc rift on that rule of law goes and everyone's cast their spells for turn, Final Fortune comes out, then the rule of law goes and you get your turn, and Born Upon the Wind is
Oh, yeah.
added to that. And so the like end of turn, remove the stax piece, untap, win. Has gotten a little riskier as well, and there's kind of another layer to it, and because that Born can come out again with your removal spell on the stack, and and Beseiju and Otawara, and there's just more factors.
Oh
More
yeah,
factors.
100%.
Seen some Angels Graces floating around, but
Yeah,
that's less of a
comeback, dude. I've seen it.
yeah.
I've seen it.
Yeah. It feels good when it works, that's for sure.
Oh yeah, my problem with Angel's Grace is it's like a dead card 80% of the time it's sitting in my hand.
Mm-hmm. And it would feel bad as hell to have to tutor for it.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, if you're mystical.
But then
tutoring
when
for Angel's Grace,
you get shit on on those Thorical win attempts, and you got something you could maybe put something back into your deck and your Angel's Grace at the upkeep. I mean,
yeah,
I guess that's this kind of thing. Other people Thorical and then Angel's Grace on their turn while they're trying to win.
oh yeah, right. Like there are certain circumstances for every card, obviously, but Angel's Grace, I just feel like is a dead card 80% of the time. That's why it's always like the 101st card in my deck.
127th. That got cut a long time ago.
Fair enough, yeah.
So I think that just the last thing on Stax pieces, real quick, is
Mhm.
just to kind of reiterate that, like, in this world where the early advantage piece is kind of king, or even the turn three ring with a fistful of protection ends up winning the game.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
These kind of if you play blind obedience, if you play dauntless dismantler and whatnot, it does generally increase the number of keepable hands you get in mulls, because it increases the games where you have access to not only a turn 1 or 2 Ristic or a turn 1 Fish or Esper, but you also have those as hits, right? And then you also have probably Dranith in some pods as a hit of like, these are keepable hands with things I really want to prioritize in this. Yeah.
No, yeah, 100%.
So you're going to see, by 6, you're going to see a hand that has one of those things if you're playing a density of them. And so just a little nod to deck building and when thinking about this meta.
No, for sure. And I guess kind of we're running out of time here a little bit. So one of the last questions I guess we'll kind of talk about, because you kind of brought it up here, Deke, is Mulligan specifically. Are you guys mulling for the commanders at the pod? Are you mulling for a specific game plan? What are you guys trying to do at the beginning of the game? I know I should have brought this up a little bit earlier ago, but fuck it. We're here and we're talking about it now. What do you guys do when it comes to your mulls? We'll start with you, Deke.
So just real quick, the decks that are at the table, the first thing I'm thinking about is can I, on what turns do I feel like relatively safe tapping out to develop? What does my development look like? Not necessarily like, what does this hand do? As games get slower, hands can do a little bit less depending on what they have. And what I mean by that is like, yeah, it's good to mull. I should mulligan more. I keep a lot of second sevens that I shouldn't, I'm sure. But like really thinking through those few turns of like, okay, what decks are at the table? Is this the deck that's going to develop and try to set up a win on turn 4, 5, 6, 7, 8? Where are we at with speed? Is there a control deck at the table that's going to keep us alive, so I can actually be kind of parasitic and just kind of develop my stuff over here and just kind of leech off of everyone? It really depends on the other decks in the table, but my opening hand, I'm generally looking for cards that actually matter in the pod and are of either high impact or are going to allow me to extend the game to be able to find the cards that are high impact in the pod.
Fair enough. Rucky, what about you, my boy?
Mulliganing. I am not good at this. I it might be a deck building flaw. It might be me being greedy while I'm doing my deck building, but it's mulliganing has been one of the hardest things for me to figure out thus far playing CDH. And I try at the beginning of every pod to look at everybody's commanders and try to figure out what kind of game plan they are on. But I find myself more often than not being a lot more greedy in my mulligans. And it's I also think it has a lot to do with the decks you're playing.
Mm-hmm.
Because I have no business mulling for interaction if I'm Rogsai or a Rakdos deck or something like that. I'm playing Corvold right now, so if I know if I'm going up against a Staxy deck or something like a Tivit that might have a Cursed Totem effect or a Grafdigger's Cage effect, something like that, I'm looking to burn and fucking turn. I'm looking to get my ass up and run and get to the quickest win I can get to, because those kind of things are really easy to get to for the other pod. And I'm thinking, hey, what is he mulliganing for at this pod right here? You got to also think about what all your other opponents are going to do.
Mm-hmm.
So whether you know them or not, if you go into a pod with a bunch of people you don't know, you have to go off of what you think their deck might do.
Yeah.
And you have to assume they're all going to do that too. So I think it has a lot to do with like the conversations you have in the beginning of the game. Knowing the kind of person, trying to get a little psychological eval on somebody to try to figure out what he might do. What does personality sound like? He wants to fucking rip it, or does it sound like he wants to troll you and just make sure you can't play the game? You know.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that plays a lot into my stuff. That's why I don't mulligan that good, because I got so much shit running through my head. Is like, am I trying to win real quick, or do I think this guy's gonna mull to shut me off as soon as I step foot in the game, or shit like that? But yeah, it's a very hard thing to do. Mulliganing is very, very hard, and you also have to know your deck inside and out to get really good mulligans going.
100%. So
It's
like,
hard building a new one and then
yeah,
starting to figure out what mulligans you want.
that's always the hardest part. For me, I have the luxury of been playing the deck I've been playing for half a year, if not longer.
3 years.
Yeah, right. Najila. So I kind of know what I'm mulling for at this point. So typically, what I'm trying to grab, and it's gonna sound super greedy, I'm trying to grab a turn 1 Najila and a turn 2 draw engine. Period. If I can get those on the board in that order, my likelihood of success is tenfold compared to just a turn 1 Najila or just a draw engine. I'm trying to do that as quickly as possible. A B always. I should be a little bit more aggressive with my mulling in regards to interaction, but my interaction package is pretty light, and I feel like my deck specifically really benefits from a well-developed board state opposed to just a try to win right now. I know there are people in this server and a bunch of people I've talked to that are like, Najila's a turbo deck, and I think Najila has fast aspects. It can develop a board quite quickly. But I think Najila's main specific game plan is a longer game, a game where it can develop a little more. That way you can have your interaction. You are able to work a pivot a little more efficiently and shit like that. That being said, I could be completely piloting the deck wrong, but this is how I have garnered success with it. I know Deke over there is kind of looking like this guy's.
Well, no, I was just thinking. No, dude. I think that it's just a philosophy thing of like, if you're saying like, okay, I'm trying to move to, somewhat of a longer game. I think it just takes a kind of a step back to like, I don't know, when I started playing in this format, I was like, I don't know, 2020 or 2021 or whatnot, and the Najila decks of that time were kind of more mid-range. They played kind of more value engines, and I think that's the way you have to lean if you're saying like, okay, I'm going to understand this deck from kind of a mid-range thing, because Najila doesn't really have any card advantage stapled to her. She has clock stapled to her. She has combo stuff stapled to her, but it just takes some deck building philosophy. It just okay, here's my hypothesis. I'm gonna add these cards and play this way to see if this is true, and if it is, that's sweet, and if it's not, whatnot. But
Oh yeah,
I
100%.
think you can play your
it's
deck
interesting.
however you feel like playing it, and you can mold any deck to play the way you want it to play.
Oh yeah.
It's just it becomes an optimization thing after that when you're going off the beaten path, and what if any commander it could be better in this slot when the game plan is such, um because I mean anything can be played anyway. It's just got to have the right colors in it, right?
Oh yeah.
And it's whatever you're geared to however you're geared to play your deck. But yeah.
Well, like, yeah, kind of to tie into that, and like the customization of CEDH is kind of limiting, but the fact that we all kind of start with a shell and expand from there is what we like. A lot of us do. At least I know what I've done. But
Most
with that being said, like even still, I think a 17 to 20 plus card difference in a shell, like versus like a straight up net deck, is enough room to make it your own and stuff like that. And Deke's blue farm list is one of the most unique blue farms I've ever seen, and it's a house. If you haven't played against
works.
it's great.
come get you some.
And like people like same thing with Najila. My Najila list is about 23 cards different than the most of the lists you'll see in top 16. But I'm consistently winning with the deck. It's all about playstyle at the end of the day. I think that's really what this all kind of boils down to. I think there are two things we could realistically sum this up to, and I think that at the end of the day, when it comes to board state assessment, I think you really do need to talk with the table a little bit more. Not necessarily the guy that's in the advantageous position, but talk with the rest of the people at the table, because the guy that's in the best position will always try to pivot it and point the blame to someone else. At the end of the because I'm sorry, nobody likes to be targeted.
They want to win.
Yeah, exactly, right? So I think sitting down, talking to the table, and being aware of what your deck can do are two of the things that would alleviate about 90% of problems when it comes to board state assessment and just big old misplays to begin with.
Yeah.
It all comes with experience, dude. You gotta put some reps in, man. That's what it is. You gotta put some reps in no matter what. I mean, a lot of it is game knowledge, card knowledge, deck knowledge, other shit. I'm sorry I cut you off, D. Go ahead, man.
Oh no, man. I was just thinking of I think one of the I know we're running out of time here, but
You are totally fine.
I feel like the one or I don't know. The biggest mistake I've been seeing lately is with as much advantage engines as there are, people kind of misevaluating win windows. And
Yep.
so when I'm in a game of, and we're getting about, turn 3, turn 4, I think the question that you should always be asking yourself is, does my position get better from here or worse from here? Better from here or worse from here? And it's constantly changing, and trying to figure out, like, you go into the pod with an idea of like, cool, I want this game to last. I'm gonna try to win on turn 2, or turn 3, or I'm gonna try to win on turn 8 after I've stopped everyone. Whatever your plan is, but it really changes so much because so many decks have access to just like massive repeatable card advantage with like no further mana investment, that these games get so snowbally, and missing your window can be kind of one of the biggest the biggest problems. There's a pretty clear, like, if you look at a board, right, turn 4 these days, it's going to be pretty evident based on known information and kind of play patterns, the way people have been tapping the mana, like what's going on, like who has interaction. It can be pretty telegraphed, and so just doing your best to just check in with yourself frequently of like, okay, what gets me to a better spot and in how many turns, is the timing in predicting a turn or two in advance like gets exponentially more complex with the amount of repeatable card advantage. And so just trying to like extrapolate from known information is going to get you, I think, pretty pretty far.
Yeah,
Oh fuck yeah.
that's good.
If that
That's
makes sense.
good. No, definitely.
Oh, 100%.
Definitely.
But
sure.
it was great conversations, boys. Unfortunately, we are going to have to call it a wrap here. I greatly appreciate you two for coming on. Is there anything you would like to have as like closing statements or anything, either of you? We'll start with you, Rucky, and then we'll move over to Deke.
Don't feed the fucking fish.
Fair enough. All right, Deke, you're up, my boy.
Oh man, Jerry Springer final thoughts.
I'm not the mama, man.
Damn. I play more Grand Abolisher. Yeah, I guess
There it is.
that's my final.
Yeah.
That's my final.
Fuck.
Play more
There-
silence effects.
Yes,
Play,
honestly.
play your defense grids. Play your
At the
Play
right
the
time,
level.
people.
Yes, don't
At
just
At the
spam
right
the
time.
defense
Don't play it
grids.
in pass, please.
defense grid is a silence. Defense grid is a silence. Lavinia, unless you're in a dedicated deck, is a silence. If you're trying to shut off interaction, shut it off in that turn and win.
Oh, what do you think about the new Lavinia though? The stackable. I like that one.
Oh.
It's pretty
The
cool.
yeah.
It is pretty cool.
That
I haven't
go ahead.
really seen it. I haven't been playing much against much like green white stacks or whatnot where it would be seen, but it's a cool concept.
You
to
don't
be
you don't
able
think
to-
it may be a maybe a viable cut for Lavinia? With negating the downside? It's just mono white.
Yeah, it's 2 and a white. Yeah, it's interesting. Interesting. I don't know if it's. So I think the issue is that I mean, you can turn one it, but I don't know.
You just fuck it off whenever you want, whenever you need it to be gone, you know? I mean, it doesn't do all Lavinia does, but I mean, you
Yeah.
can't cast certain things. It gets countered, but this one just counters the 0 drops.
It's interesting. It's interesting. I mean, there's a bunch of cards like this, man. Like that Boromir, right? There's
Yeah.
there's like Void Mirror. There's I don't know. There's a bunch of these just like weird cards that are definitely gonna have a home at some point. Like they're powerful effects, but I don't know what the hell they're doing. You know, like Cutzel's a powerful card. Like it's another Grand
Cutzel's a
Abolisher.
fucking house.
Cutzel
just-
made Teferi cuttable in Sisse.
Interesting.
Yeah, it did.
Is it better for any reason?
Aside from the card advantage you can get with Sisse and it being it's easier to tutor besides with Sisse. I've
You
seen
still
it being
play-
cut. I haven't made the change yet because I still like the bouncing my dockside thing. But aside from having it with you see, Teferi shuts you guys off all the way. And that was always the play in Sisse. If you got the Teferi out on the battlefield and then somebody stifled your win somehow, you proceeded to fuck the rest of the table out of interaction with anything on the table. So I think that was the big kicker for why it's getting cut so much in the Sisse decks. Because granted that one dockside bounce was really really good, but if you don't have a dockside and you just drop it on the board and you get cucked, then Cutzel doesn't do you like that, you know.
Yeah. Oh, it's interesting.
All right, so
Sisse draws a card when she smacks too, right?
yeah, right.
exactly.
And then you throw an Agathis in there, and then all your other creatures become
Agathis,
drawing.
and then every one of your and Agathis is
There you
already
go.
in the deck.
But
So,
I guess
There you go.
my
That's cool.
my Jerry Springer final thoughts are talk more with the table, guys. Honestly, at the end of the day, that's kind of what this all really boils down to. There should be more, especially in CEDH, like at tournament or whatnot. I don't give a fuck. Talk more with the table. Like if you guys
and
are
be
about
honest
to
about
lose-
what you're talking about. Don't
yeah,
be a bitch.
yeah. Like A, be honest, and B, if you guys are in a losing position, everybody's gonna be honest and be like, "This is the threat. This is our points of interaction. It's A, B, or C. Period." All right, you've gathered that information. Now you can figure out what you want to do. I think talking with the table at the end of the day is the biggest thing that people don't do nearly as much. Nearly
And
enough, sorry.
I don't mind getting. You see, I don't know why this brought me here. I don't mind losing.
Yeah,
I
honestly.
might. I mean, but the thing about it is losing a good game is a lot different than losing a game where you know somebody is just not doing
We
the
sat
right
here
thing.
for
Mm-hmm.
we sat here for an hour and a half. This was an hour and a half of my time, and like,
You just
yeah,
You
throw
man,
it
removed
in
the
with
Dranith and passed the turn. You fucking
yeah,
cocksucker.
yeah.
with a known breach. Yeah, with a known
Yeah,
breach.
right. Some
Thanks.
craziness
I
like that. Yeah.
appreciate you. Yeah,
hmm
yeah.
It
Yeah. I'm
happens
gonna
all the
go
time.
Thanks for having me
pull
on, Josh.
Oh, not a
hair up.
problem, boys. But yeah, it was great having you guys. I greatly appreciate it. And stay tuned. Next Wednesday, we'll have another episode of Table Talk. Catch you guys later. Deuces.
Later.